Okay guys, so let's go over the drill here today. Just a mix review, a little bit of the equations and adding, multiplying, so everything we've done so far in rationals. So remember, when you're adding, you want a common denominator. So in this case, there's nothing else to simplify, so you want to make sure you're just multiplying by each other. Now in this case, what this means, so on the top, folks, you will be foiling or boxing, okay? Because you have x minus 1 times x plus 1. So when I foiled that, I get x squared minus 1 plus, and then here's this denominator, still the same. Now on the top, when I foil that, and again, I'm talking about x minus 2 or at times x minus 3, I get x squared minus 5x plus 6. And then you just combine any like terms you have on the numerator. So 2x squared, nothing with the negative 5x, and plus 5. All over numerator or denominator. And then you want to try the t-chart for the numerator, see if you could break it up. I already did, and I couldn't break it up with anything, no more factors to cross off or anything like that. So this is your fractional answer. Okay, let's move on to a review of dividing here. Again, the key is you make sure you factor everything. So this should be coming pretty simple by now. Change it to multiplication, and then flip these two. Oh, that should be a minus 3 and plus 2. Sorry about that. So now let's take a look. What can we cross off? The x minus 3, x plus 4, x plus 2. And remember, it's not 0 left over here, it's a 1. So 1 times this fraction makes itself. And there's your answer. And 3 and 4 review solving of the equations we've been doing here. So if you take a look, if it's just one fraction equally one fraction like a proportion, cross multiply. Now, first thing we're going to make sure to remember, for my restrictions, okay, you need to set each of these equal to 0 to figure out what x is not allowed to equal. So 3x minus 2 equals 0. Well, when I solve that, I add the 2 and then divide by the 3. So x is not allowed to equal 2/3. Because if x is 2/3 and I plug it into this fraction, it becomes 0 and you cannot divide by 0. The other restrictions is when you set the x minus 1 equals 0. So x cannot equal 1. Now all that means is to keep in the back of your mind, as we do this, if we get those two answers anywhere as our final solutions, it's no solution. It's extraneous. You can't count it. So let's take a look. 2 times 3x minus 2, so I'm just doing cross multiplication, 8 times x minus 1. So 6x minus 4, 8x minus 8, subtract 6x, add the 8, divide, so x equals 2, which again is not part of our restriction, so we have our solution. So again, when you see one fraction equaling another, just cross multiply and use your algebra 1 skills to solve the rest. Now it always gets a little bit more complicated when you have more than one fraction, okay? So with more than one fraction here, you need the least common denominator, which is going to be both factors of x minus 5 and x minus 3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x minus 5, x minus 3, x minus 5, x minus 3. Okay, so on the right side, right away, this x minus 5 will cancel out with this x minus 5. But you still have to multiply x plus 5 times x minus 3. which means, guys, that is a FOIL, okay, or a multiple distribution or box, whatever you want to call it. So when I did that on the right side, I get x squared plus 2x minus 15. Then from there, I'm going to look on the left side. Notice here, the x minus 3's will cancel each other out, okay, from top to bottom. But that still leaves you with x minus 5 times x plus 3. So you're going to have to FOIL these two binomials. So when I do that, I got x squared minus 2x minus 15. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, minus 15. And then, okay, now look, when you pass the multiplication to this fraction, the x minus 5 cancel each other out, but you have x times x minus 3. X, again, this numerator times what was left over, the x minus 3. So that is x squared minus 3x. So this one's definitely a little trickier, guys, when it comes to using the FOIL and the multiplication. But the process itself doesn't change. Least common denominator, cross off common factors as you multiply, and now we don't have any fractions in the problem, and that was our goal. Now you still are expected to be able to do your algebra correctly, so combining like terms. So on the left side, for instance, it's going to become 2x squared minus 5x minus 15 equals x squared plus 2x minus 15. I'm going to bring the x squared to one side, see if I end up having to factor, okay? So subtract the x squared. So 1x squared minus 5x minus 15. So at this point, since I still have an x squared left over, I will be having to factor. So you're going to want to set this equal to 0, okay? Because the fact that we have 1x squared left over, you have to do that. So I'm going to subtract 2x, take it away from here, and add 15. So I set it equal to 0. That's my goal, guys, is setting it equal to 0. Well, when I do that, I get 1x squared minus 7x, and then these will cancel each other out. So that's all I have. So when I factor it, I only have to factor with the GCF. So bring out the x and the x minus 7. So I get x equals 0 and x minus 7 equals 0 and x equals 7. So you will be expected to FOIL or box sometimes, guys, because that's your basic Algebra 1, even in context of the equation. And notice these are not within the restrictions, so we're okay there. But you always have to check that in the end. Okay? So next class, you have a quiz on solving equations. It was going to be today, but since I'm not here today, it will be next class. So expect on Tuesday when you come in, you will be having a multiple choice quiz, about 4 or 5 problems with an extra credit on it, on just solving. So today, what we're going to switch over is to do complex fractions. So you're going to be given the notes. I'm going to go through them with you, and then you'll have time to practice some in class today. Good thing is we've already started them a little bit, guys, with division. So it's just going to be a little on the trickier side because it's a combination of adding and dividing.